Hi, my name is Lucy Bennett. On Christmas Eve, my parents opened the massive front door of our Greenwich mansion and threw my single suitcase onto the frozen stone steps. My younger sister Victoria stood right behind them, arms folded, grinning like she'd just inherited the world. "Let's see how you survive now, big sis," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I dragged that suitcase through thick, swirling snow. No money, no car, nothing left except the winter boots on my feet and the long wool coat keeping me alive. I collapsed onto a snow-dusted park bench inside our gated neighborhood, shaking so hard my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. That's when she appeared, an old woman, barefoot in the snow, skin turning purple, gray hair whipping in the winter wind. She looked like the cold had already claimed her. Without thinking twice, I stood up, took off my only winter boots, and placed them at her frozen feet. She grabbed my trembling hands, looked straight into my eyes, and whispered, "Kindness like yours is rarer than diamonds." Then she walked away and vanished into the snow. Exactly 1 hour later, 19 black Cadillac Escalades rolled up in perfect silence and blocked the entire street. The same woman stepped out of the middle vehicle. Same face, but now she wore a floor-length wool coat, hair in an elegant chignon, diamonds flashing at her wrist. She walked straight to me, smiled, and said only one sentence: "I've been watching you long enough to know exactly who you really are. If you've ever been thrown away by the people who are supposed to love you most, drop in there, or the city you're watching from in the comments, so I know I'm not alone. Trust me, keep watching. What happens next will blow your mind." That afternoon, I was still in shock from the layoff email that landed at 10 a.m. Another round of restructuring at the Manhattan advertising firm I'd given 6 years to. I packed my desk plant into the passenger seat of my 12-year-old Toyota Corolla and pointed it north toward Greenwich. 43 minutes if traffic was kind. It wasn't. I'd already called Mom from the parking garage. "Just need to crash for a couple weeks while I figure things out," I told her. She sounded distracted, said dinner was at 7, and hung up. When I pulled through the gates, the house looked like something from Architectural Digest. 15-foot Douglas fir in the 2-story foyer. White orchids everywhere. The caterers in black ties setting the dining table for 20. Dad, Robert, was uncorking a 2005 Chateau Lafite like it was Tuesday. Mom, Catherine, was fastening a new Mikomoto pearl choker that definitely wasn't there last month. And Victoria, my 27-year-old sister, was twirling in a backless red silk dress, flashing a 6-carat emerald-cut diamond on her left hand like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Brandon, my ex of 4 years, stood behind her with his arm around her waist. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and tried to smile. "Hey everyone. Bad day at work." That was all I got out. Victoria spun around, eyes wide with fake concern. "Oh my God again." She gasped loud enough for the caterers to hear. "Third job in 4 years, right?" She turned to Mom. "Remember when she got fired from that startup in Soho for not being a team player?" Mom's lips tightened. Dad didn't even look up from his wine. I felt my face burn. It was a reduction in force. They let go of the entire creative team. Victoria waved her new ring in my direction. "Brandon just closed his Series A, 32 million pre-money. Investors love him." Brandon gave me that same smug half-smile he used when he ended things 2 years ago with, "It's not you, it's timing." Dad finally set his glass down. "Lucy, we need to talk." He didn't motion for me to sit. He never did when it was bad news. He told me straight, last month, he'd amended the family trust. All of it, 42 million in principal, was now in Victoria's name only. Irrevocable. Signed, notarized, filed with the estate attorney in Stamford. He said I was 32 capable, and it was time I stood on my own. Mom added, "We can't keep funding a lifestyle that doesn't produce results," as if my salary had ever paid for their orchids or Victoria's Hermes bags. I stood there, mouth open, trying to process that my own parents had just legally disinherited me while I was still standing in their foyer. Victoria pulled out her phone, already recording. "This is gold," she laughed. "Big sis comes home broke on Christmas Eve. Say something for my followers." I looked at Dad. "You're serious?" He met my eyes for the first time all night. Cold. Final. "You have 20 minutes to pack what you need. Security will let you back in tomorrow for the rest if you make an appointment." Mom wouldn't even look at me. She busied herself adjusting a gold ornament on the tree. I walked upstairs on autopilot. The bedroom I'd had since I was 10 still had my high school track team photos on the wall. I threw jeans, 2 sweaters, laptop, and toiletries into the old Coach Weekender Victoria hadn't stolen yet. Everything else, books, yearbooks, the framed Columbia diploma, would have to wait. When I came back down, Victoria was live on Instagram, narrating like a wildlife documentary. And here comes the prodigal daughter with one sad suitcase. Any bets on how long before she's sleeping in that Corolla? Dad opened the front door himself. The snow had started falling thick. I couldn't see the end of the driveway. Temperature was already dropping below freezing. I stepped over the threshold. Behind me, Victoria called out, sweet as poison, "Merry Christmas, Lucy. Don't freeze." The door closed with a soft, expensive click. The alarm beeped twice as it armed. And that was it. In under 30 minutes, I went from daughter to trespasser in the only home I'd ever known. I stood on the stone steps in the dark, one suitcase at my feet, wearing the only warm things I still owned, that long wool coat and my winter boots. The second that heavy door sealed behind me, everything went quiet except the blood pounding in my ears. I stood on the empty street trying to breathe, but the air felt like knives. My mind kept replaying Dad's flat voice, 42 million gone with one signature, and Mom refusing to meet my eyes. I was 32 years old, and in one conversation, I had become a stranger to the only family I'd ever had. I started walking because standing still felt worse. The wheels on the suitcase rattled over the perfect pavement, the only sound for miles. Every mansion I passed had warm golden windows and laughter spilling out, Christmas trees glowing behind gated driveways. Each one reminded me I no longer belonged anywhere. My fingers were already numb. I kept thinking, this can't be real. Any minute, Mom would open the door and call me back, say it was a cruel joke. But the alarm stayed armed. No footsteps. Nothing. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, until I found myself in the little public garden beside the old Presbyterian church. There was one iron bench under a street lamp that actually worked. I sat down hard, dropped the suitcase handle, and finally let the tears come. I cried for the little girl who used to hide under that 15-foot tree waiting for Santa. I cried for every birthday where Victoria got the bigger present and I was told to be grateful. I cried because I had always believed that if I just worked harder, achieved more, they would finally see me. Turns out none of it mattered. I wasn't disposable because I failed. I was disposable because I wasn't Victoria. The tears froze on my cheeks. I hugged my knees to my chest and stared at the ground, trying to figure out how I was going to survive the night, let alone the rest of my life. That's when I heard the slow scrape of bare feet on concrete. I looked up and saw her, an elderly woman, shuffling toward the bench. Gray hair tangled and loose, thin shoulders hunched against the wind, skin so pale it looked translucent under the lamp. She stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly, and spoke in a voice rough from cold. "Young lady, do you know if any of the shelters still have room tonight? I've been walking up from New Rochelle. Everything's full." I wiped my face quickly. "I'm sorry. I don't have anywhere either." She studied me for a long moment, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. Then she lowered herself onto the bench beside me, leaving a careful distance. We sat in silence while her breathing steadied. I noticed her feet were bare and already past purple, heading toward that scary white that means the damage is deep. Something inside me cracked open. Here was someone who had even less than I did tonight, and she was still polite enough to ask instead of demand. I felt ashamed of my own self-pity. Without saying anything, I stood up, unlaced my only winter boots, and placed them in front of her frozen feet. She looked startled, then tears filled those pale blue eyes as I helped her slip the boots on. Her hands, thin, veined, trembling, reached up and touched my face. "What's your name, child?" "Lucy," I answered, voice cracking. She repeated it softly, like she was tasting something precious. "Thank you, Lucy." Then she did something I'll never forget. She took both my icy hands in hers, squeezed once, and held my gaze for a long time. No words, just understanding passing between two strangers who suddenly weren't strangers anymore. After what felt like forever, she let go, stood up with new steadiness in my boots, and gave me the smallest smile. She walked away slowly, swallowed by the night before I could even think to call after her. I sat back down alone, colder than I had ever been in my life, teeth chattering so hard my jaw hurt. But for the first time since the door closed, the ache in my chest felt different, lighter, like giving away the last thing I had somehow gave me something back I didn't know I was missing. The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and cheap air freshener. I had been staring at the same LinkedIn page for hours, applying to anything that paid above minimum wage, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Miss Lucy Bennett? The woman's voice was crisp, professional, with a faint Boston accent. This is Helen Crawford calling on behalf of Mrs. Vivian Ashford. She would like to meet you immediately. I laughed out loud, actually laughed, because it sounded like a prank. Who is this really? The line stayed silent for 2 beats. Mrs. Ashford will explain everything. A car is waiting outside room 112. I looked through the peephole. 19 identical black Cadillac Escalades lined the cracked parking lot like a presidential motorcade. The lead vehicle's rear door opened by itself. I grabbed my keys and walked out in the same jeans and hoodie I'd worn for 2 days. She was waiting in the middle car. The woman from the bench, hair now in a flawless low chignon, camel haircoat cinched at the waist, my winter boots replaced by red Louboutin heels catching the sun. She looked 78 going on ageless. Lucy, she said gently, as if we were old friends. The door closed with a soft thud. The partition rose. We pulled away. 20 minutes later, the gates opened to a 1920s Tudor mansion on a quiet cul-de-sac in Old Greenwich, hidden behind oak trees and a 10-foot hedge. I had driven past this street 1,000 times and never knew it existed. Inside smelled of cedar and roses. A fire crackled in a stone hearth big enough to stand in. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over a private pond. She motioned for me to sit on a cream sofa that probably cost more than my car. A butler poured tea neither of us touched. My full name is Vivian Ashford, she began. My late husband founded Ashford Holdings. When he passed 12 years ago, I took the company private and turned the profits into the Ashford Family Foundation. We own or finance over 450 million square feet of commercial real estate across the country, Vivian continued. The foundation distributes roughly $135 million a year. I just stared. My brain couldn't process the numbers. She leaned forward. Every Christmas Eve for the last 25 years, I do one thing the same. I leave the estate dressed as someone who has nothing. No security visible, no wallet, no phone. I walk until I find someone who still has a heart when they believe no one is watching. Most years, I walk all night and go home disappointed. This year I found you. She explained that after I walked away, her security team, plain clothes, parked 2 blocks over, had kept eyes on me from a distance for 48 hours. They watched me check into the motel with cash, eat vending machine food, apply to 50 jobs in one sitting, cry in the shower, and never once try to find out who the homeless woman was or brag about the good deed. You're the first person in 15 years, she said quietly, who gave away the last thing keeping them alive without expecting anything back. I need to know if that was a fluke or who you really are. She stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. I have no children, no heirs. When I'm gone, strangers on a board will decide where my money goes. I don't want that. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be thrown away on Christmas Eve to decide how we help the next person who gets thrown away. She turned to face me. I'm offering you a room here, a salary, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If at the end you're the person I believe you are, the foundation becomes yours to run. Not a gift, a responsibility. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Why me? Was all I managed. Because, she said, eyes suddenly fierce, I know exactly what it feels like to sit on a freezing bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my own father did it to me. I promised myself if I ever got the chance, I'd make sure no one who chose right in that moment stayed lost. She extended her hand. So, Lucy Bennett, will you come home with me? I moved into the East Wing the following Monday. My new bedroom was bigger than my parents' entire downstairs, with French doors opening onto a garden I could actually smell from bed. Helen Crawford, tall, silver-haired, zero nonsense, handed me a leather binder the thickness of a phone book and said, "Welcome to boot camp." The first month was brutal. 6 a.m. runs around the pond with Vivian's former Navy SEAL trainer. 7:30 breakfast meetings where I learned to read a Form 990 tax return faster than most CPAs. 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. sitting beside Vivian in board meetings at the Foundation's offices in downtown Greenwich, taking notes while billionaires argued over impact metrics. Evenings were spent dissecting 20 years of grant archives until my eyes burned. October arrived with that crisp edge that makes Manhattan feel alive. I was in my corner office on the 24th floor of our Midtown headquarters, reviewing final numbers for the Second Chance housing project, when Helen knocked once and opened the door. "Your sister and Brandon Whitaker are downstairs. No appointment." I felt my stomach drop the way it used to when Victoria borrowed my clothes in high school and returned them ruined. "Send them up," I said. They walked in looking like they'd rehearsed the performance on the elevator ride. Victoria wore a modest navy dress instead of her usual Instagram outfit, hair in a low ponytail, minimal jewelry. Brandon had traded the startup hoodie for a navy suit that almost fit. Both carried the tight smiles of people who had practiced apologies in the mirror. Victoria spoke first, voice soft, eyes shiny. "Lucy, I've been awful. We've been awful. I'm so sorry for everything. For Christmas Eve, for the things I posted, all of it." Brandon nodded vigorously. "We're getting married next spring. Trying to do things the right way this time." I stayed behind my desk, hands folded, and waited. Victoria took a breath. "Dad's in trouble. Some investments went south. He and Mom might lose the house. And Brandon's new company, Healthcare AI, just needs $2 million to close the seed round. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death." I raised an eyebrow. "Which part is life or death? Dad's mortgage or your valuation?" Brandon forced a chuckle. "Look, I get it. You're big time now. But blood is blood, right? $2 million is nothing to the foundation." I leaned back. "Tell me what happened to the $42 million trust fund you took last December." Victoria's mask flickered. "We diversified. Crypto, NFTs, a few angel deals Brandon's friends were running. It was supposed to 10x. Then everything collapsed. Most of it's gone." Brandon jumped in. "Market downturn. Happens to everyone. We just need a bridge." I opened the folder Helen had quietly placed on my desk, screenshots, bank records, a TechCrunch article titled "Bennett Family Heir Loses Fortune on Memecoins." I turned the folder around so they could see. 87% gone in 11 months, I said calmly. "You bought matching Range Rovers, put a deposit on a condo in Miami, and paid influencers to promote shitcoins. That's not a downturn. That's arson." Victoria's mask slipped. "You're seriously going to sit there in your fancy office and let Mom and Dad go homeless?" I pressed the intercom. "Security to 24, please." Brandon tried sweet reason. "Come on, Lucy. $2 million is petty cash here. You'll never even miss it." The door opened. 2 guards in suits stepped in. I stood. "This foundation exists for people who never had a safety net. Not for people who lit theirs on fire and now want mine. You're not getting a dime. Not today. Not ever." Victoria went scarlet. "You ungrateful." She was already pulling out her phone, hitting record as the guards took her elbows. The video hit TikTok within 20 minutes. But the internet did what it does best. Old classmates found receipts. By midnight, the truth had buried the lie. The sky over the Bronx was the color of steel on opening day. Second Chance rose like a promise kept, for stories of glass and brick wrapped around a courtyard where kids were already chasing each other between planter boxes full of herbs and vegetables. 3,000 people filled the plaza, families who would live here, donors, city council members, every major network, even the governor cutting the ribbon. I stood backstage in a simple black suit, heart hammering louder than the marching band warming up. Helen squeezed my hand once. Vivian, elegant in winter white, gave me the smallest nod from the front row. This was the project I had bled for: 200 permanent supportive apartments, on-site medical clinic, job training center, preschool, rooftop garden, and a policy that no one would ever be turned away for lack of paperwork. The mayor finished his speech. The crowd roared when my name was called. I walked to the podium. The microphone felt heavier than any trust document I'd ever signed. I looked out over the sea of faces. Near the back, almost hidden behind a column, stood Robert, Catherine, and Victoria. Dad wore an old peacoat that hung loose on his frame. Mom clutched a paper coffee cup like it might disappear. Victoria had cut her hair short and looked strangely small without the armor of designer labels. I let the silence settle for 3 full seconds. 1 year ago tonight, I began, voice steady, I was thrown out of the only home I'd ever known with 1 suitcase and no place to go. I learned that night what it feels like when the people who are supposed to catch you drop you instead. A ripple moved through the crowd. Cameras zoomed. I also learned something else on a freezing park bench. Real family isn't DNA. Real family is the stranger who chooses to see you when you're invisible. Real family is the hand that reaches when you have nothing left to give in return. I turned and gestured to the building behind me. This is second chance. 200 families will never again have to sleep in their cars because a landlord raised the rent. Kids will never again do homework in the back seat because the lights got shut off. And every single person who walks through those doors will be told the same thing I needed to hear that Christmas Eve: you are not disposable. You are not alone. You are home. The applause started slow, then exploded. People stood. Phones rose like a wave of light. I looked straight across the plaza, directly at the 3 figures in the back. Dad's shoulders shook. Mom covered her mouth. Victoria stared at the ground. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I simply held their gaze for 1 heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Then I stepped away from the podium. The governor cut the ribbon. The marching band struck up. Children rushed forward with flowers. I walked down the steps, through the crowd that parted like water, and headed for the main entrance. Robert tried to step forward. Lucy. I kept walking. Not fast, not slow. Just forward. The massive doors of Second Chance opened automatically as I approached. Warm light spilled out onto the concrete. I crossed the threshold. The doors closed behind me with a soft, final sound. I never looked back.